regional court in Krakow in the southern Poland, and I became a part of the movement which we can call judicial resistance, which was formulated in Poland after 2015, after the very massive attack against the independence of the judiciary which we faced. And I want to share with you some of my impressions from this period. I want to show you some, I think, original ideas created by the Polish version of populism. I will concentrate mainly on this judicial aspect of this populist authoritarian backsliding which has happened in Poland. My presentation may be a little bit chaotic because I prepared it in a very relatively short time, but I hope you will find something interesting in it. In general terms, I can say that we live in peculiar times in which those politicians who give simple answers to complicated questions are gaining popularity. Their answers don't have to be rational, and the solutions they propose don't have to be effective. What matters is that they are simple and appeal to the imagination of the masses. It is important that people hear what they want. We refer to this category of politicians as populists. Populists promote simplified solutions to complex problems, which is combined with appealing to collective emotions or proclaiming catchy slogans in line with the expectations of the majority of society in order to gain its support and influence or power. Populism is often based on unrealistic or demagogic promises made by those in power to citizens. However, promises that can be fulfilled are particularly valuable in building a social support base, which is most often achieved at the beginning of the populist government's term. In Poland, we all remember the 500 Plus program, which was offering 120 euros monthly for the second and each subsequent child, which was an important factor influencing the outcome of the 2015 parliamentary elections. And this promise, after coming to power, was implemented as promised. In terms of social engineering, it involves use of demagoguery, appealing to stereotypes and social myths. Such myths can justify social antagonism, pit the poor against the ruling elites, and appeal to racial and ethnic prejudices. The aim of social engineering may also be to create political myths that are conducive to the implementation of political objectives. In Poland, we all do remember the Smolensk myth, which said that the catastrophe of presidential airplane was caused by Mr. Putin or was caused by Mr. Tusk, and the ritualistic propaganda surrounding this Smolensk myth in the form of the Smolensk monthly commemorations, which took part every month here in Warsaw for 5 years. I will give you an example of populist rhetoric which preceded coming to power of Law and Justice parties. By the way, this name, Law and Justice, is so ironic that I can't imagine more ironic name. On 25th October 2015, parliamentary elections were held in Poland, and they were won by the previously opposition Law and Justice party led by Jarosław Kaczyński. The party went into election campaign brandishing the slogan of so-called good change that it was going to bring to Poland. The good change was to consist of breaking the feeling of impossibility, introducing reforms and thus improving a number of previously neglected areas of public life, and enabling, another slogan, Poland to get back on its feet from the knees in foreign policy, especially in relation to the European Union. According to Jarosław Kaczynski nomenclature, the parties that had previously ruled Poland were supposed to be the part of the post-communist pact or post-communist system, which prevented them from taking such actions. By the way, under Mr. Kaczynski's and his accomplices' terminology, also the Polish judiciary was the part of the post-communist pact, which is a paradox if you take under consideration that when this reform, pseudo-reform of the judiciary in Poland started, the average age of Polish judge was 33 years, and we were 26 years after changing of the system from the communists. So the average Polish judge was about 11 or 12 when the communism in Poland has finished. So it was quite difficult for average Polish judge to be a part of post-communist pact, but it didn't matter in terms of propaganda. Populist movements and populist governments are often created by charismatic leaders who seek to establish as direct contact as possible with their supporters, presenting themselves as the voice of the people, or in Poland as representatives of the sovereign. Charismatic leaders build their popularity by disseminating fear among citizens, by inventing alleged or real enemies of the nation, and by presenting themselves as the only one shield that can protect them from these enemies. Enemies can be external. For example, in Poland, according to Mr. Kaczynski nomenclature, such external enemies were refugees from North Africa, bringing unknown germ and diseases. It was irrelevant that at that particular time, probably in Poland, there was even no one immigrant from Northern Africa. It was enough that there was a danger of these immigrants. Another external enemy of the society, traditional, historically motivated, is Germany. And during the campaign, it was raised that Donald Tusk's grandfather served in the Wehrmacht during the Second World War. It didn't matter that he was taken there by force and he escaped at the first occasion and joined Polish forces in the West. Another enemy of Polish nation was the European Union. The President Duda called it an imaginary community. And of course, we faced also the internal enemies. One of the group of internal enemies were, of course, judges, allegedly running the country in the judgecracy. Medical doctors, I don't know why, but in Poland we faced creation of special units within the prosecution service dealing with medical malpractice in a country where the healthcare system is inefficient in many areas. Also, the internal enemies were striking nurses and even protesting people with disabilities. Maintaining charismatic leadership requires various measures, such as an intensive propaganda, which requires far-reaching control over the media and the press market, and restrictions on civil liberties. In Poland, there was introduced institution of cyclical gatherings, which were registered by the government, and this was able to prevent counter-demonstrations against pro-government demonstration. That was a special institution introduced. Now an example of very nice anti-judicial propaganda from this period. It is exactly from 2017. In September 2017, a large-scale negative billboard, television, press and internet campaign was launched against the Polish judges. The cost of the campaign amounted to over 2 million euros, which is comparable to the cost of the presidential campaign. It was carried out by the Polish National Foundation, which was financed by 17 largest Polish state-owned companies controlled by managers appointed by the former ruling party. Although the foundation's statutory objective was to promote Poland's good name abroad, the aim of this particular campaign was to undermine the authority of the judiciary in Poland. The government claimed that the campaign was aimed at promoting a major reform of the justice system. In reality, it was a black PR campaign conducted by the ruling party, presenting Polish judiciary in a distorting mirror through biased descriptions of situations related to disciplinary proceedings against judges and actual or alleged judicial errors. Some of the situations described during the campaign were true.
It was the first slide. The first slide.
Oh, okay, I will help you. So, some of the situations described in the campaign were true. It happens once, 2-3 times a year that Polish judge is apprehended drunk in driving. However, some examples were completely false and another examples were manipulated. One of the examples of manipulation was that in the campaign it was described that Polish judge was apprehended in the shop stealing sausage, and such situation really did happen, but it wasn't mentioned during the campaign that the judge was retired for many years and the judge was mentally deranged. It was insignificant for the purposes of this campaign. For the purposes of campaign, judges were portrayed as a privileged caste. The campaign was black and white. As you can see in this picture, it's one of these great, huge billboards. And of course, judges were placed on the black side of billboards and portrayed as classic examples of incompetence, corruption, and laziness. What does this slogan, this billboard says? On the black side, that's how it is now. Judges say about themselves, we are privileged caste, it's time to change it. Another white side says, that is how it is going to be in the future. Judges, like every citizens, when they break the law, they should be taken to responsibility. You can check it on the website www and so on and so on. And one of the judges of Krakow Appellate Court very aptly commented that a situation in which one branch of state power pays for a negative campaign against another branch of the same state is so peculiar that even George Orwell or a Monty Python couldn't have come up with such an idea. And it was really, really peculiar when 10,000 Polish judges could see thousands and thousands of huge billboards directed against them by the executive. It was just amazing, shocking, and really, really strange. Operating in liberal democracies, populists in number of cases seek to reformulate the political and social models that function within them, including by limiting the role of independent institutions such as the media and the judiciary, which of course naturally limits the protection of civil rights. It is no coincidence that in 2018 two new chambers were established in the Polish Supreme Court, namely the Disciplinary Chamber and the Extraordinary Control and Public Affairs Chamber. Both of these chambers were entirely staffed by judges recruited by the National Council of the Judiciary. However, this National Council of the Judiciary had previously been politicized by appointing its judges members, who constitute majority of this body, by politicians from the ruling camp. So the composition of the National Council of the Judiciary was changed in such a way that out of 25 members of this body, as many as 23 were either politicians elected by another politicians or judges elected by politicians or of the ruling majority. It's hard to imagine less independent composition of such body, which under constitution, under Polish constitution, is responsible for protection of the independence of the judiciary. No comments. First of this chamber, the disciplinary chamber, as a court of second instance for judges, was a convenient tool for exerting a chilling effect on judges, while the second chamber, Chamber of Extraordinary Control and Public Affairs, has in its scope of competence to review the legality of all general elections in Poland, including parliamentary elections, European Parliament elections, and presidential elections. This body also supervises legality of political parties' expenditures, and such a scope, wider scope of competences directly influencing the performance of the democratic system poses a direct threat to political pluralism in Poland. Unfortunately, this chamber is still active, it still operates, and it is going to assess the legality of upcoming presidential elections on 1st June this year. So if the result of the election will be so-so, it can be very, very complicated political situation in Poland if this chamber of the Supreme Court, in theory, in practice, the politicized committee, will decide that, I don't know, that elections weren't wrong. We will see. In these difficult times between 2015 and 2023, many Polish judges took up the fight to preserve the independence of the judiciary. Those judges were criticizing this pseudo-reform in the media. They were referring requests for preliminary rulings to the Court of Justice of the European Union, and they were questioning the legal status of improperly appointed judges in their court rulings. Improperly appointed judges were those who were assessed by this unconstitutionally composed National Council of the Judiciary, which was under very serious political influence. At that time, I was the spokesperson of the second largest Polish association of judges, called TEMIS, and I was targeted with 4 disciplinary proceedings and 1 or 2 criminal proceedings. So when these judges started the real resistance movement, in response, especially in 2021, the Polish government launched a real witch hunt against these defiant judges, the judges who opposed the subordination of the judiciary to politics. It was a little bit similar to medieval witch hunt. And the role of the Holy Inquisition was played by the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court, which suspended 6 judges for indefinite period, as well as by the Minister of Justice and court presidents appointed by him, who temporarily suspended 10 judges. All suspensions were unjustified as they were imposed because the judges has applied European law. The role of inquisitors was played by 3 central disciplinary commissioners and prosecutors from specially created Internal Affairs Department of the State Prosecutor's Service, who were directly subordinate to Minister of Justice, who appointed them to their positions. And the role of hammer for the witches was played by the infamous Mazur law, which prohibited judges from applying EU law under threat of professional death, as there is no other way to describe the punishment of being deprived of the right to practice your profession. And the role of Torquemada was played by the former Minister of Justice, Mr. Zbigniew Ziobro, who pulled the strings of persecution from behind the scenes. And the system which was created at that time enabled politically motivated persecution of judges in 4 ways. Firstly, through unfounded disciplinary proceedings, which were instigated against more than 100 judges. None of these judges had committed a disciplinary offense or violated the dignity of judicial profession, and their only fault was that they defended the rule of law. I can give you an example that as many as 21 unfounded disciplinary proceedings were brought against the former spokesperson of the old legal National Council of the Judiciary, Judge Waldemar Żurek, who was the most persecuted judge in Poland. The second way of intimidation of judges were unfounded criminal proceedings which were pending against at least 10 judges. Thirdly, we as judges faced administrative reprisals, such as the unjustified temporary suspension in performing of our duties, transfer between departments of the court, and deterioration of working conditions. And fourthly, we faced a brutal campaign against judges conducted by the state. I gave you already one example, this billboard campaign, but it was only a part of this brutal campaign. Before all these events regarding ordinary judiciary, which I have described, the Constitutional Tribunal had been politicized, among other things by selection of 3 substitute judges on the places which were previously legally occupied. In this way, the Constitutional Tribunal ceased to be a safeguard of democracy, protecting the rule of law by limiting the arbitrariness of the executive, and became a tool in the hands of that authority, enabling it to rule through the law, it is from a position of placing itself above the law. The hollowing of institutions that act as guardians of democracy is another characteristic feature of the exercise of power by contemporary populists. These institutions are not abolished, but through changes in the law and personal changes, namely filling positions with their own people, they become facade institutions. In Poland, this kind of activity affected the Public Prosecutor's Office, the Constitutional Tribunal, the presidents of ordinary courts, the National Council of the Judiciary, and the Supreme Court. Thanks to the resistance by the independent media, civil society, the judicial resistance movement, and the reaction of international institutions safeguarding the rule of law, like European Commission, the European Court of Human Rights, and the Court of Justice of the European Union, the process of politicization of the judiciary has not been completed, fortunately, although currently approximately 60% of Supreme Court judges and approximately 25% of the ordinary court judges have been staffed by people selected with participation of irregularly constituted politicized National Council of the Judiciary. Now, still the situation of Poland is very difficult and complicated. We have a few institutions still in force, which I call the anchors of autocracy. Of course, this is our current president, Andrzej Duda, who is going to be replaced soon. Let's hope his successor will be a pro-democratic person. Secondly, we still have this Constitutional Tribunal, which cooperates with President Duda. And as I have already mentioned, we still do have this newly created chamber of the Supreme Court, which is Chamber of Extraordinary Control and Public Affairs, which is going to oversize the legality of the upcoming election. So the situation is not easy by any means, but still, do you know what's the difference between the optimist and the pessimist? It's very relative. The optimist believes that we live in the best possible world, and the pessimist is afraid that the optimist can be right. But I'm on the optimistic side. I truly believe that in Poland we can get rid of these autocratic tendencies. However, at this moment, all depends on the results of the election on 1st June. Thank you very much.
To show what we see in the field, and I think it's very valuable to see as a politician, as a member of justice system, and who started in the Krakow, as far as I remember, in the very beginning level, and then now on the top of the juristic system. I think it's very valuable to see the facts that you presented to us here, and I'm sure that most of the researchers will contribute what you already started. But the question remains silent because you asked the question with the researchers, they started the thing, and I'm sure that while you're presenting, they also had many questions to maybe direct to you. If you allow me, I would like to open the Q&A session.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Shema. Thank you, Deputy Minister. We're really, really grateful that you came. Very enlightening talk, and I personally am very impressed with your courage. And speaking as a lawyer, and a Harvard graduate, after the news we had today, the parallels to what is happening in the United States is very obvious. And we've seen that not just judges, judicial system overall, but also individual lawyers who are representing, let's say, clients that are with the opposition in the United States are coming under increasing pressure. So my question is, if despite having a new government in Poland, it has not been possible to rid the Supreme Court of those 60% of people who have been appointed by the old political regime. If it's so difficult to clean the judicial system, is there maybe something wrong in how Supreme Court judges are appointed? We've seen that in the United States, of course, appointed for life, so on a completely random basis by the acting president, and this is obviously the highest appeals tribunal in Poland, as you said, in charge of review of the election. What do you think needs to change in the way that our highest judges are appointed? And you may know in Britain we have a slightly different system. If you were in charge of everything and you could change it tomorrow, what would you change?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, from the Polish perspective, I think it's crucial that the independent body is responsible for appointment of judges, for their assessment. And in Poland, up to 2015, the composition of the National Council of the Judiciary, which is this body, was really independent because the majority of this body was created by judges. Out of 25 members, 15 were judges elected by the peers, by another judges. 10 members were, among them were 4 members of the lower house of parliament elected by lower house of parliament, 2 members of upper house of parliament elected by upper house of parliament, representative of the first president of the Supreme Court, the first president of the Supreme Administrative Court, representative of the President of Poland, and representative of the Minister of Justice. In this composition, this body was, of course, it was combined of different branches of power, but having majority of judges elected by another judges, it was independent from executive, from the legislative. And then in 2018 this composition was changed, and the lower house of parliament gained the right to elect 15 judges members, and it completely changed the way of acting of the National Council of the Judiciary. It became a kind of politicized committee which appoints and promotes those judges who are prone to be loyal to the political leaders. I will give you the two examples of decisions of this reformed National Council of the Judiciary. There was competition for the position of the judge of the regional court in Łódź, and there were 6 candidates. 5 of them were just very good or brilliant, and one candidate was really poor, really poor. He had the highest rate of judgments squashed by the second instance from entire court, and he was promoted. What was fantastic was the justification of this decision, official justification in writing. They wrote like that: the high rate of judgments squashed by the second instance proves independent way of thinking. I couldn't agree more. However, it is a way of thinking independent from rules of professionalism, from knowledge of legal solutions, and so on. And in other examples, 2 candidates for the judge of the regional court in Olsztyn. One candidate was judge of the basic level of court with 10 years of experience, with a scientific degree in law, 100 publications on subject matter, and his counter candidate was legal advisor with 10 years of experience without any special achievements. He used to have only one advantage. He used to be the member of Law and Justice. In the past, he resigned just before getting to the competition because it's forbidden in Polish constitution to be a judge and member of the political party. And moreover, he paid about 3,000 euros for the electoral campaign of Law and Justice in 2019. And try to guess who won the competition. Under the Constitution, the role of the National Council of the Judiciary is to prepare an opinion on candidates. So, for example, we have 5 candidates for the position in the upper level court. So the National Council of the Judiciary, basing on the assessment of the judge visitor, basing on the assessment of local judicial self-government, prepares an opinion about the candidates, which of the candidates fits best, who is the best in professional terms, in terms of experience, and so on, and then the president decides. So as long as this body was independent from executive and legislative power, it worked properly.
Interesting.
Hi. It seems to me that the story of Poland is becoming increasingly more similar to the story of Turkey, but I have a different question. By thinking of Elon Musk's recent situation, who aligned his interests with Donald Trump, I'm going to ask a question to understand the emerging situation in Poland. So populist leaders, rather than reforming the system, they try to establish their own establishment with the passage of time by overtaking this existing system. But during that process, they align, they cooperate with existing incumbent powers, civil society organizations, university, media, etc. But gradually they try to undermine the establishment. But on the other hand, establishment forces such as big corporations, media, although they know in the long term the existing system will be replaced by the populist leaders, they do not avoid from cooperating with the populist governments. So this is really a double responsibility of the establishment forces. In the establishment stage, they get benefit from their privileges. People start feeling left behind, and they become open to populist sentiments, emotions. But when populists come to the power, they start aligning their interests with, this time again with populist governments to keep their privileges. Is this similar situations happening in Poland? Because it is really happening in many countries under rising authoritarian populism. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a traditional way of thinking. If you can't beat, join. So I think it is happening everywhere. For example, in terms of media, we were in very fortunate situation because in terms of TV, we used to have and we still do have one very strong broadcaster, TV broadcaster, which is TVN, and there were at least 3 or 4 situations in which Law and Justice tried to take control over TVN because Law and Justice took control over the Media Council, and in this way 2 times they imposed very high penalties on the TVN for, I don't know, breaching the rules of the broadcasting, which was complete paradox, because if you compared what was shown in TVN to what was shown in the official channels of Program 1 and Polish 2 of Polish state-owned TV, it was uncomparable. And there were plans of nationalization of the TVN, but fortunately it was owned by the Discovery Network. So the strong response from the US Department of State stopped these tendencies. I must admit, as a member of this judicial resistance, that without this independent, strong TV channel, we wouldn't be able to resist. It was one of the most important factors in preserving democracy in Poland, this TVN channel. And now, I think it was even supported by the US administration, the independence of this channel, even I think in the times of first Mr. Trump. So there was this kind of support, fortunately. But of course, at the personal level, many people acted as you suggested. So if you can't beat, join. I think that about 10% of Polish judges just joined the winners and then became the members of the politicized Supreme part of the Supreme Court. They became the members of politicized National Council of the Judiciary. You always have in the system some people who feel that they are underrated. Usually they are just poor in professional terms, but they are ambitious, they feel underrated, so you can always count on such people when you want to introduce something new.
Thank you so much. So it's very delightful to go with the Q&A still. I'm very sure that we have too many questions, but just to keep your energy and enthusiasm for the later conversation, I would like to ask if you have any question, we can maybe limit the Q&A with the one more question. Yes. You mentioned media, and I would like to give the mic to our media legend of ECPS.
Mr. Deputy Minister, thank you so very much for this fascinating presentation. You didn't mince your words. As you said, we will have the second round of elections, presidential elections on the 1st. And as far as I follow the first round, the far-right candidates came out the third and the fourth. So there's a good chance of the next president will be from far-right or PiS again. Can you contextualize the presidential elections for us for the second round? What's your bet? What's your take on the second round?
As I said, I'm an optimist. I have to be an optimist. Well, many things can happen. Before the term of the election, can comet hit into Earth? I don't know. To tell you the truth, in case of winning of this law and justice candidate, I can't imagine any kind of plan B. I'm afraid it will be a tragedy.
Do you think that there would be a backlash for this populist effect, like Canada and Australia? Do you see any sign?
The problem with Polish political system is like that in theory the president doesn't have a wide power. He's not like, I don't know, president of the United States. He has more representative honorary powers, except for one power which he has, the right to veto any kind of draft law. And that's the real cause in such situation like now in Poland, because the lower chamber of parliament can override, reject the veto, but it requires 3/5 of the vote of the voting persons. And the ruling coalition doesn't have this 3/5. So how can you effectively rule? How can you reverse the negative effects of this anti-democratic populist backsliding of the recent 9 years if you don't have to pass a law which will heal, for example, the legal status of not properly appointed judges? You are helpless. You can do minor changes, but it is not enough to reverse the effects of so many years of populist, anti-democratic backsliding.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We enlightened the rest.
But I really do believe that the pro-democratic candidate will win. I can't imagine other option.